Hi, I'm personal trainer Yuji.
Today I want to talk about the incline dumbbell press for individuals in their 40s to 50s. This exercise focuses on the upper part of the pectoral muscles. While it's relatively easy to develop the lower part, the upper part is generally harder to build. The reason it's more challenging is that there are simply fewer muscle fibers in the upper half compared to the lower half. Therefore, since there are fewer fibers, it naturally becomes more difficult to develop. Because of this difficulty, it's essential to pay close attention when performing the incline dumbbell press, as neglecting it can lead to even less development. I hope to eliminate such inefficiencies. Particularly for those in their 40s to 50s, there are specific considerations to keep in mind, so I would like to highlight some key checkpoints. First, since this is an incline press, the angle of the bench is important. I believe that if you raise the lower part properly, it should be fine to focus on the upper part as well. Of course, it's about the angle for the upper body. This is the issue, but I think the angles vary depending on the product or item. In this case, we have a horizontal position, and then there's an angle of about 30 degrees. After that, there's about a 45-degree angle, which is quite high. There are even steeper angles, close to 70 degrees, but those are quite rare. The question is, what height should we actually set it to? However, in the case of this bench, there are options for home use at angles of around 30 degrees and 45 degrees. In gyms, there might also be a shallower option, around 15 to 20 degrees, which is slightly lower than 30 degrees, so it's a matter of deciding where to set it. Generally, I think around 30 degrees is good. I feel that 45 degrees might be too steep. As for how to set it, you can try lying down and see. Ultimately, when considering the upper part of my pectoral muscles, it relates to the clavicle. From the very bottom to the very top, it is compressed. At about 1/4 of the clavicle, the midpoint is here. The midpoint is at this position. And then half of that is at the 1/4 line. The direction of this 1/4 line should be facing the ceiling. The state where this 1/4 is pointing directly at the ceiling is the best position. Well, there are a few things to be careful about. The angle you set for the incline dumbbell press should correspond to the angle of the arch in your back, so there isn't a simple answer like, this angle for the bench is good. For me, I can create a decent arch, so my butt stays firmly on the bench. In this position, with a good arch, when I perform the exercise, the top quarter of the movement should be directed towards the ceiling, and this is the most effective way to do it. This brings us to the point that, in the case of individuals in their 40s to 50s, many people struggle to create an arch. There are many who lack flexibility and cannot form an arch. A lot of people have rounded backs or are hunched over, which means they cannot create a significant arch. For those who cannot create much of an arch, the height of the bench may be too high. Therefore, it is important to consider these factors. Well, if there isn't an angle between this and flat for home use, that's understandable. However, if there is an angle just below this one, I believe gyms will definitely have it. For those who lack flexibility in their back arch, it's okay to go a little lower than 30 degrees. So, I want you to adjust this based on your own flexibility, aiming for the position where the bar comes to the top at about 1/4 of the way. This is particularly important because many people in their 40s to 50s lack back flexibility, so it's essential to adapt it to your own needs. It's important to have an arch. This is incredibly crucial. However, it's better to have a well-defined arch rather than just leaving it as is, because a strong arch allows for both the vertical arch and the lateral arches to be developed, which makes it easier to engage the pectoral muscles. Those without an arch tend to have their chest flattened, making it difficult to effectively target the pectoral muscles. Therefore, having an arch is beneficial. To achieve this, one should perform stretches alongside the bench without an arch in the back, and engage in proper stretching techniques. Additionally, by practicing street exercises that focus on contracting the spinal muscles, one can tighten the body effectively, which helps in creating that arch. Such stretches and exercises should be incorporated as supportive measures. Now, when actually performing the incline dumbbell press, it's done in this manner. One common issue that arises during this process is the angle of the armpits. Sometimes I find myself thinking about the flat dumbbell press in a similar way. When that happens, I tend to open my elbows quite a bit while performing the exercise, which can lead to my body being in a position that is not vertical. Ideally, I want my forearms to be vertical. Many people fall into the trap of having their armpits open in this position, which is quite common. There are various reasons for this. One issue is that not being able to create the arch is quite problematic. Since the arch isn't formed, it becomes difficult to feel the tension when lowering the weight. It makes it hard to sense the engagement, and this is in a collapsed state. Now, if we take it to the extreme and completely collapse, you won't feel any tension at all. So when you open your elbows, you can feel the stretch at the base of the pectoral muscles. This often leads to the tendency to think, oh, there's tension here, but that's not necessarily the case. You need to have an arch. If you are at an angle, the load will not be properly transmitted. The entire body must be vertical for the load to be effective. It is essential that this is communicated clearly, and the front must be absolutely vertical. In this case, the position of the armpits, for example, when viewed from above, should be at a 90-degree angle, but instead, it should be around 70 degrees, not 80 degrees. When performing the incline dumbbell press flat, it feels about like this. If you set the angle to around 80 degrees, or even a bit narrower at around 70 degrees, it works perfectly. When we say that the upper part of the pectoral muscles is being pulled, it means that if you spread too wide during the incline dumbbell press, especially around the 80-degree angle, it can be problematic. The relationship between the body and this angle makes it easy for the front of the shoulders to become tense, more so than the chest. The fibers of the pectoral muscles spread out from the base of the arm, creating a fan-like shape, which means that this area is almost a single point. As it spreads out from there, the direction of the muscle fibers should be stretched in this way, which causes them to angle slightly. The forearm being in this direction is the most correct position. This direction is different from the direction of the clavicle, so it should be adjusted accordingly. If you want to stretch the pectoral muscles, setting the angle to about 70 degrees, which is slightly lower, is the best way to create a stretch in the upper part of the pectoral muscles. Doing it at around 70 degrees rather than 80 degrees allows you to feel the stretch more effectively. Then there's the depth. When performing this exercise, it's important to consider how low to lower the weights. Of course, since this is strength training, it's better to engage the muscles as much as possible and to tighten them, but the question is how low to actually go. What I mean is, please keep it shallower than the feeling you get when doing it on a flat surface. Make it shallower than flat as well. It's better to change the sensation from flat, so really push it down. If you want to go deeper, you can go down to about this point, but of course if you go that far, the front of your shoulder will start to tighten up again. So it's better to stop just before that point. In terms of the bench press, when you're doing it flat, you usually go down to where it touches around the chest area, right? But to be honest, when doing the incline dumbbell press on an incline bench, I usually keep about 7,000 to 8,000 yen worth of space from my chest. The height difference feels significant compared to flat exercises. With a barbell, during the incline press, there's no need to touch the barbell to the chest when lowering it, as it can strain the shoulders. Typically, you would keep about 7 centimeters of space. The same applies to dumbbells. You shouldn't lower them beyond that. So, rather than going as deep as in flat exercises, you should aim for a shallower range to maintain tension in the pectoral muscles. Therefore, it's important to be cautious not to go too deep. Conversely, when performing the incline dumbbell press, it's important to focus on maximizing the contraction as much as possible. This is similar to the flat press, but just because you think you are contracting doesn't mean you actually are. If you let your form slip, you may end up in a loose state where you're not truly engaging the muscles. Therefore, it's crucial to push your chest out and maintain an arch while ensuring that your shoulders don't move forward and your torso doesn't cave in. This position allows for the best contraction. First and foremost, avoid lifting too high. I would like you to observe how high you can lift from above your head and from behind, while keeping it deep and controlled. Honestly, this is about as much as I can give you. When lowering, it surprisingly doesn't go down as much as you might think. Right now, I'm at this level. By the way, as I mentioned earlier, I can create quite a good arch in my back, which helps a lot. If someone who can't create that arch in their back tries to lift to the same level as me, their chest will actually cave in. That's why. Well, for those who can't create an arch in their back, if you lift as much as I do, your chest might cave in and your shoulders might rise. So, it's okay to think of a range that's even narrower than what I currently do. You can aim for about half of the full range compared to what you have in mind. It's perfectly fine to think of it as about half, as long as you maintain a position where your shoulders don't rise and your chest doesn't cave in. It is much better to focus on this range of motion, as it allows for better performance in the incline dumbbell press at this university. Developing the latissimus dorsi is important, and it is crucial not to lift too high. However, the height also depends on whether you have a good vertical and horizontal alignment of your shoulders. You might not be sure if you are maintaining a proper arch, but generally, if you are not able to create a significant arch, it is better to avoid lifting too high. You will be able to use it effectively. Now, regarding the incline dumbbell press, the number of repetitions per set should be considered differently than for flat presses. For flat presses, I think it's fine to aim for around 10 repetitions at the limit, focusing on proper form. However, for the incline, I would like you to consider using a weight that allows for 12 to 15 repetitions to reach your limit in one set. Therefore, it's better to use a slightly lighter weight and do a few more repetitions. The reason for this, as I mentioned earlier, is that the muscle fibers are significantly fewer compared to the lower body. It's minimal and easy to lose form. That's why it's hard to understand. It's really difficult to grasp. Compared to flat exercises, it's hard to feel the engagement, and you might barely manage 10 reps. If you push through with other muscles, you might also barely hit 10 reps, which can lead to more shoulder involvement. You might lose the feeling of using your shoulders, so it's better to use a slightly lighter weight that allows you to reach your limit at around 12 to 15 reps. This way, you can avoid engaging other muscles and more easily feel the activation of the pectoral muscles. Therefore, I hope you don't push too hard with the weight. Another point is that the incline dumbbell press should be done before the flat bench press. This is because the muscle fibers are less engaged, making it harder to feel the exercise, so it's better to do it first. If you do it later, your pectoral muscles and overall strength will be fatigued, making it even harder to gauge your power. Therefore, focus on doing the incline dumbbell press earlier in your workout, before the flat bench press. This is particularly important for individuals in their 40s to 50s. Generally, if your body is a bit stiff or you struggle to create an arch, you need to consider that. Of course, stretching to help create that arch is necessary, but even with that, some people may still find it difficult to achieve the arch. By keeping the points I mentioned in mind, you can effectively develop your upper pectoral muscles, so please make an effort to incorporate this into your routine.
Please subscribe the channel and follow my Instagram and X. I hope to see you next time. ありがとうございます。